to okay, I'm just going to show some slides here. Some years ago, I was asked by a magazine to send in a photograph of me as a 9-year-old, and I thought, well, you know, is it okay if I asked them, is it okay if I send in a drawing of myself instead? And they said, sure, go ahead, knock yourself out. So I have this picture of me. I'm on my bed. I'm reading the big book of horrible rare diseases. I'm surrounded by other books, everything you always wanted to know about scurvy but were afraid to ask, diseases of the tropics, A Child's Garden of Maladies, Lockjaw Monthly. And when I was growing up in Brooklyn, lockjaw was something that I thought about a lot. And I've subsequently met other people who thought about lockjaw, and I don't know whether this was just that, you know, we played on a lot of rusty playground equipment or what, but lockjaw was definitely a part of my worry world. But the book that on the bed that was really, it was sort of the Bible in our house, was the Merck Manual, which is another book that is on the bed. And why would we have a copy of the Merck Manual in the house, considering that neither one of my parents were professional doctors? Well, my mother's sister was a registered nurse, and she always gave my mother outdated copies of the Merck Manual. And most of it I could not read, but I could read symptoms and signs. And I knew very well that leprosy was very rare in Brooklyn. But it didn't mean that it was non-existent. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a little background on things. I'm going to show you some cartoons. This is Pigeon Little. The sky is falling. The sky is, oh look, part of a bagel. This is the Fountain of Puberty. I don't know if you've ever sat outside of middle school for any length of time and watched kids come out. It's pretty funny. This is when moms dance. And a lot of times people ask me, where do you get your ideas for cartoons? And most of the time I really can't tell them. But this particular cartoon really did come from something specific, and it was something my daughter said. And she was about 16, and she was doing her homework in the living room. And she had the boombox going. And you must know, if you have ever been a teenager or have had teenagers, that there is almost nothing more disgusting in the eyes of a teenager than to see one of their parents doing a little kind of dance. And I guess I just wanted to see if she was paying any attention. And so she was, doing her homework, listening to this music, and I just kind of came into the living room, kind of doing a little dance, and she looked up and she said, "Mom, stop, you're hurting me." And I asked her if I could use that line, and she said, okay. So, this is the life-changing magic of shoving everything into a huge, hefty bag and leaving it for somebody else to deal with. This is the MRI of love. This is Urban Trail Mix. This is how Grandma sees the remote. TV explodes, caused nationwide blackout, tidal wave starter, never saw this one before, launch rocket ship, house blows up, drop the big one. This is sort of a desk joke, I guess. Too early to begin working on and too late to do anything about it. This is the last Thanksgiving. Can't have salt, lactose intolerant, vegetarian, vegan, macrobiotic, fanatic traditionalist, on a cleanse, strictly kosher, ultra picky gourmet, and allergic to gluten. This is the very first cartoon that I love the greeting card genre. This is new from Narcissist cards. Wow, your birthday is really close to mine. Isn't that amazing? And I once had a sad thing happen to me too. I can hardly speak about it without crying. And speaking of bon voyage, guess where I'm going? France. one time I was asked to speak at Hallmark Cards to the people who make the cards, and it was very, very weird, because I was telling them about my favorite genre of greeting card. It's the kind when you're in the supermarket, and they're like these trifolds, and they have like this kind of like pastel-y sort of background, and it's some sort of like insipid drawing of like a sailboat on the water with like a sunset, and then they say like in this fake handwriting font, like, I'm sorry that the troubles we're having, but the feelings, and I was laughing away, and nobody else was laughing. And, yeah, so that's why I don't do that. This is Obit Man, I think of him as. I don't know if you guys read the Obits. Very cheated if they don't tell you like how it happened. I mean, like as if somehow it'll help me. You know, oh well, you know, he was walking and a ladder, you know, fell on his head, and it's like, well, then, you know, that won't happen to me. Anyway, which brings us to read a couple of things from this book. This is a memoir I did about my parents in the last 10 years or so, maybe actually fewer than that, years of their lives, and kind of about them as individuals, their relationship with each other, and their relationship with me, and more specifically, how we all confronted those final chapters in life. And because I was an only child, that was sort of, it was kind of left up to me. For better or worse. And this is a picture of me with them. And I look at this picture and it's kind of funny because this is like the 1960s and my parents are dressed like it's 1936. and I think this sort of like typifies what my growing up was like in many ways. This is like how they dressed when they went to the beach, you know? They were very, very, very old-fashioned people. My mother wore blouses that buttoned up the back. I don't even know where she bought these blouses. You know, this is the swinging 60s. Anyway, this is the Wheel of Doom. These are stories, these are true stories that I heard growing up. Friend's husband killed by falling flower pot. Friend nearly blinded by mascara causing infection. Friend who traveled too much, jaundice. A rash then dead, a headache then dead, a lump then dead. He was too happy. He jumped off a chair and broke his metatarsal. Guy who almost died after playing the oboe. You wonder, how does that happen? Well, why don't I tell you? My mother's brother, she had 3 brothers and a sister. One was a nurse. She had one brother who was a jazz trumpet player. And he and his weird wife would come over every Tuesday and they would fight. And then they'd go on to my mother's sister's house on Wednesday and fight. But anyway, so my mother and her brother, they would be like talking. And I remember this, he started telling her about this guy that he knew who played the oboe. And one morning, he woke up and he was bleeding from every pore. And I was listening, you know, because it was an apartment, I'm listening like almost fainting from panic. And then they started trying to figure out what could have caused this to happen. And their decision was, between the two of them, neither one of whom is a doctor, they decided that it was because playing the oboe was very difficult. And to get sound out of that reed is just a lot of pressure. And I guess one day he just like blew up or something. Friend's son killed by baseball. But there were all kinds of like crazy stories. A cold in your kidneys. My mother, I was not allowed to sit directly on the ground. Sitting directly on the ground could lead to a cold in your kidneys. My mother knew a person that this happened to, and the girl died. Water in your ear, this was like a cause for total panic. Getting water in your ear, it would like never come out. I don't know what would happen. It would like molder away and your brain would like liquefy or something. A too tight, my parents referred to each other without any irony as soulmates. The rocks in his head matched the holes in mine. They were born 11 days apart, and they grew up 2 blocks apart in East Harlem, New York City. They were in the same 5th grade class. He was a fat boy in the back of the room. They never dated, much less anything else, anyone besides each other. And my father says, we were too poor. And I'm like, what? Aside from World War II, work, illness, and going to the bathroom, they did everything together. I'm going to Wallbaum's. Hold on, I'm coming too. My mother even washed my father's hair for him. It's not as if they never fought, because they did. Don't sit sideways, you're twisting your kishes. But the concept of looking for something better or being happy, that was for modern people, or movie stars, i.e. degenerates. Elizabeth Taylor, 7 husbands, I go on. They were a tight little unit. Codependent? Of course we're codependent. Thank God. Maybe they believed that if they just held on to each other really tightly for eternity, nothing would ever change. Anyway, I'm going to get back to cartoons, because I know you guys have been sitting for a long time. This is Nancy Drew Mysteries, the later years. Nancy Drew and the Missing House Keys. I know, I left them right there. Nancy Drew and the Mystery of the 8 Pounds. How did I gain 8 pounds? I ate nothing. And Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Computer. You and I are going to be great friends. This is dousing for coffee. This is creation, the true story. On the first day, God created nothing because there was plenty of time. Second day, same deal. Why rush? On the third day, he created a list. On the fourth day, he was not in the right mood. On the fifth day, all this stuff was going on you don't want to know. On the sixth day, God created the whole shebang. And on the seventh day, he rested. This is Donna Karen's nightmare. This is Trapped in a How Are You vortex. No complaints. How are you? I'm good. How are you? Good. How are things going? Fine. You? Everything's good. How are you? Good. How have you been? Good. So how's life? Good. And yourself? No complaints. How are you? Good. How are you? This really go on. This is in a just world. This is the Holy Trinity. Really, have to admit it. And this is the vain but realistic queen. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who, if she lost 10 pounds and had her eyes and her neck done and had the right haircut, could in her age group be the fairest one of all? This is, I love those end of the world guys. And finally, tuned in, turned on, dropped out, dropped in, worked out, saved up, dropped dead. And thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And we have time for a 15-minute Q&A, and then we're going to have Roz Chast sign books downstairs, and we are selling books for those of you who didn't bring any with you. So we're going to start right here with the first question.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for coming.
I noticed you signed just your first initial, and they touched in the movie on the issue of let's get a woman in here and among the selection. So were you sort of a pioneering woman cartoonist at the New Yorker? Were you aware of gender issues?
I had so many of my own stupid problems that, you know, being female was just one of a constellation of a lot of things that made me self-conscious. So I didn't really think about it. I've signed my name with the initial since I was in about 6th grade, so I don't know why.
Over here.
Oh,
Hi.
hi.
Have you ever submitted a cartoon to the New Yorker that you've known for sure they would love and they didn't?
Oh, constantly. Constantly.
Do you remember any specific?
I can't remember any specific, but I would say that happens almost every week.
Oh, is it my turn? You're probably asked this all the time, but nobody talked about in the film about how the cartoons are created. Is it the caption? Is it the drawing? Is it an idea, then the drawing, then the caption? Could you talk a little bit about the process?
I think that a lot of us sort of carry a little notebook or pieces of paper that just sometimes something you see or you overhear or just random thoughts just suddenly sparks an idea. And then sometimes I'll remember to write it down, and then sometimes I'll remember not to put that piece of paper through the wash and lose it. And then I kind of fool around with it at the desk, and sometimes if I'm in the right mood, something funny sort of happens. I would say for me, mostly the words start out first, but every once in a while in pictures, like I mentioned the one with the Mom, You're Hurting Me, you know, that was definitely like something. But I know with the end of the world guy joke, the end is near joke, I really was in the mood to draw one of those guys, so I did, and then I just thought, oh, he needs a wife. So they really, you know, it's a combination of stuff that's in the air and stuff you're thinking about and stuff that just, you know, comes out of the blue, I think.
Can you tell us what the New Yorker paid for cartoons when you started and what they pay now?
Somewhere between $1 and $1 million.
Have you mentored any of the younger female cartoonists in any way?
I actually do have a couple. Yeah, a couple of, and they're both young and both female, and yeah, it's kind of funny to sort of suddenly be like one of the older people, but I like it, you know, it's better than the alternative, right?
Do you have plans, or have you like printed the rejects?
Well, Matt Diffie did a couple of, he did the rejection collection, subtitled The Cream of the Crap, which I think is hilarious. And so, yeah, and also, you know, in the parent memoir, there were a lot of cartoons. I mean, my cartoons I do this weekly thing that was talked about in the film. We all submit every week a group of cartoons, and a lot of times there's cartoons in my batch that are just kind of like some weird personal thing that scary. And I wound up doing a cartoon about it that the New Yorker rejected, but did appear in the book. So there were a number of cartoons in that book that I had done years before, but that worked in the book.
I was wondering about the cartoon caption contest. How do the cartoonists feel about that, and the ones that draw for it, do they have their own captions in mind?
I actually don't know that much about it. Sorry.
Did your parents get your humor? Did they enjoy it?
Well, you know, my parents were very, very, very proud, you know, and I think that they very much enjoyed the fact that they didn't have to support me, and you know, that my work was published in, you know, a magazine that they knew that their friends read. But I don't think they always understood. It was a very different sense of humor in some ways from their sense of humor, which is more like telling jokes. I mean, that's what they did. They would have people over, they would have friends over, generally like other teachers, and they told jokes. They would sit around the dinner and they would say, I have a new one. And then it was like, you know, a guy goes to the doctor, boom, punchline. And that was what they responded to. In fact, my father used to carry in his wallet this cartoon, and it was not one of mine. It was from the Saturday Review, and it was a guy lying on his psychiatrist's couch, and the punchline was, I feel inadequate because I don't understand most of the cartoons in the New Yorker. And my father loved this cartoon, loved it, and he would pull it out at the drop of a hat. And then I heard recently from somebody who had met my mother, because, you know, as I said, they were very, very proud, and they got very adept at working into any conversation in like less than 2 seconds that their daughter worked for the New Yorker. And the same way I have a good friend of mine, she, as an undergrad, she went to Harvard, and her mother got like, she was just a master at like making the conversation like turn to like Boston, and then like her daughter being in college in Boston, and then it would be like, you know, and oh, what's your daughter doing? Oh, she's in college. Where's she? Oh, she's at Harvard. So my mother got but then, so this woman told me that she met my mother and they had this odd conversation that like, oh, well, my daughter works in New York. Oh, do you know her cartoons? She said, oh, I love her cartoons. And my mother kind of leaned and she said, tell me the truth. Do you think she's funny? So, you know, it was a mixed thing.
Oh. How are the covers chosen for the New Yorker? Do they commission those, or do those come up from just the weekly art or cartoon submissions?
The cover is a different department. The editor for the covers is Françoise Mouly, and I think that there are times when she calls people up and commissions them to do something on a topical thing, but not always. You know, some weeks there's really, you know, maybe it's a holiday thing. I have done a number of covers, I think twice they were things I submitted as cartoons that they asked me to do as a cover. I hadn't originally, in fact, the first cover I did for the New Yorker I had submitted as a cartoon, and William Shun suggested to Lee to tell me to do as a cover, so I did. Mostly I just submit them and see what happens. You know, they don't ask me like specifically. Although one time they did for Mother's Day a few years ago. So it varies a lot.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hello. Did you know Ed Koren? And if so, can you tell us something interesting about him?
Oh, Ed Koren, he is, well, let's see. Can I tell that? Let me think. No. Oh, one time, no. So, yeah, no, he's a great guy. Also, he's a volunteer firefighter, so he's an interesting guy, great guy.
Hi, I just want to know, who were your influences? Like, if you looked up to anyone in particular?
Oh, golly, when I was growing up, I loved Charles Addams, Sam Gross, who's in the movie, Gay and Wilson, Edward Gorey. I guess, and I loved Mad Magazine. I loved those fake ads that they did. National Lampoon. I loved anything that made me laugh. I really liked a lot. And I think that my sense of humor tended to skew kind of dark. But Charles Addams was a big influence, and I remember discovering his stuff and being obsessed with it and having to look at it like just obsessively, you know, when I was like 8 or 9 years old. You know, Adam's and Evil, Black Mariah, just great stuff, great stuff. So, and are we?
Yeah, we're out of time. If you have any closing remarks you want to say to the audience?
No, I just want to thank you all for coming. It's been really fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. I hope you enjoyed the film.